Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, July the 22nd, 2021. Just a reminder that in approximately 90 minutes, I will be talking on Theatre Thursday about an outstanding film from 1951 by Max Ophuls called La Ronde. But today, I'm going to begin talking about a young woman called Robyn Ingraham. You've never heard of her. Well, if you're in Canada, you might have. But let's learn a little bit about this woman. This is from huddle.today, whatever that might be, September 11th, 2020. Datelined Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. There's a certain mythos surrounding barbershops. The smell of barbicide, the buzz of clippers, stylish dudes with impressive facial hair. Modern barbershops are cool places, and stepping into one can make you feel like you're part of a special club. A lot of people love that, but the experience isn't the same for everyone. The same environment that makes some feel special can make others feel awkward or unwelcome. Even for the people who work in barbershops, the environment can sometimes feel toxic. The three co-owners of downtown Dartmouth's newest barbershop hope to change that. Robyn Ingraham, Courtney Why Not? Yes, her name is Courtney Why Not? And Madison Ingram recently opened Devoted Barbers and Company. The trio says the goal is to create a different kind of barbershop, one with an open, welcoming vibe where everyone feels comfortable. We wanted to create a safe space where everybody would be accepted and could come together and just express yourself and your individuality, Why Not explains. Why Not Ingraham and Ingram are veterans of the industry with decades of experience between them. They say they are tired of the exclusive, judgy atmosphere they often encountered working at other barbers. Most barbershops feel like a cool guy club. It feels like you need to be part of this weird little thing they've got going on, Ingraham says. And of course, there's nothing weird at all about their barbershop, as we shall find out. We just never really fit into that in the shops that we worked at. So we wanted to create our own cool environment that's just for everyone. Sitting side by side on a couch in their newly renovated shop last week, the trio laid out how they plan to create this environment. As they described their vision, all three began smiling more and talking faster. They jumped in halfway through each other's answers to add their own spin or clarify a detail. They've laid out their shop so the stations sit in a quasi-circle designed to foster conversation. They plan silly questions to ask clients and make a conscious effort to include the entire room in whatever is happening. I like to spark good conversations behind the chair. This isn't the place where we talk about the weather. We're going to ask you the most outlandish questions. Why Not says. When I go to a barber shop, I find the whole business rather embarrassing. You know, you've got that apron put on you and, there you are. Someone's fiddling with your hair, reflected in the mirror so everyone can see it. I just want to get in and out. If the barber asks me about the weather, well, I will say whatever people say. But no, I don't want to be asked the most outlandish questions, but carrying on. Something that you're not going to hear in the workplace or in your office all the time, Ingram chimes in, and that's an advantage. How? So when you take a break from working in the office and you come in here, this is going to be 30 minutes of pure entertainment. Why Not finishes with a laugh. Well, it reminds me of these airlines like WestJet who've decided to turn their flight attendants into comedians, and they are not funny, and it is excruciating. But carrying on. Sit in any of their chairs and you might get asked an outlandish would you rather question or join in on a gentle ribbing. Hopefully, Ingram says, you'll end up laughing along with everyone else in the room. It sounds like torture to me. And there is a illustration of an ugly dog sitting on a chair. All three of the devoted owners are self-proclaimed dog lovers. I must say that was a terrible surprise. I think that's pretty important. It's not something we really thought about, but we are pretty stoked that it's three powerful girls running the show right now. Some people try and sometimes pit women against each other. So for us, really coming together as women, really bringing out our strengths to the table and putting it all and sharing it and growing together is really important. No, I just want someone who is not going to make me look ridiculous and perhaps actually cut my hair the way I ask them to. And apparently it's about support for each other as well. Sounds radical, but there is more about Robyn Ingraham. And this is from Inked magazine. Robyn Ingraham, Canadian barber, mental health advocate, but of course, entrepreneur and artist. And so there's a picture of her supine on a bed, wearing a bodice and, I don't know, shorts. She's showing a lot of skin, and most of that is covered with hideous tattoos. She also has those enormous earrings that you stick in here, disc earrings, I believe they're called. She placed 12th in her group. Thank you from all of us at Inked and the Music Cares Foundation for helping us provide health, financial, and rehabilitation resources to musicians in their time of need. What was your first tattoo? Robyn replies, I got my first tattoo in a motorcycle shop in my hometown in Nova Scotia. I was 15. Yes, this woman was tipped for the top. And for some reason decided to get a kiss mark on my hip. It's since been covered. Sorry, Mom, if you're reading this. Is it true that getting tattoos is addictive? Robyn replies, getting tattooed creates a whole other outlet for creativity. I knew since I was a child I wanted to have a few tattoos, but now that I'm in my late 20s, it's clear I won't stop until I'm almost covered. Having a new piece of work freshly done comes with the joys of getting a glimpse every day of the beautiful art that was created for you. Yes, Robyn was different than everyone else on earth. She was unique, but that was not enough for her. If you were voted Inked magazine's cover girl, what would you do with $25,000? I would pay off some of my student debt, upgrade a few things in my barbershop, and travel for more education within the barbering industry. I would also seek education within mental health to be able to help my clients, friends, and family when they're in need. Fingers crossed. So, is this the sort of person that one would expect to become an elected representative, provincial-wide? Well, this is from Global News, Alex Cook. Liberals face heat after Nova Scotia election candidate says she was ousted over boudoir photos. Ooh, boudoir. Sounds sophisticated. Ahead of the 41st general election, Nova Scotia's Liberal Party is being accused of misogyny and double standards after a female candidate says she was forced out of the race over boudoir photos. Robyn Ingraham was acclaimed as the Liberal candidate in the district of Dartmouth South. I looked up Dartmouth South on Wikipedia, and it's currently represented by an NDPer. But the last race was close enough that it would seem to me that the Liberals would have a good shot at retaking this seat. But they acclaimed Robyn. Typically, that means that there were no other candidates, which seems unlikely to me, But on Saturday, she said in a statement posted to her Instagram page that she would no longer be vying for the seat, citing mental health reasons. However, in another statement posted Wednesday evening, she said she was told by the Liberal Party to lie about her reasons for leaving. I posted the statement of lies. I posted because I was worried how this would look on the team that worked so hard to get me on board. But after sitting with the fact that I let myself and those around me down by hiding behind my mental illness to save something bigger than I was furious. And there's a picture of Robyn Ingraham, and she has a ring through her septum, like a beast of burden. So here's a candidate with a ring through her septum. and admits that she is mentally ill. But of course, that is exactly the sort of candidate that the people of Dartmouth South would want, right? According to the statement, Ingraham had been open with the Liberals during the application process about her time in front of photographers' lenses. She said she has used a number of platforms to post pictures of herself, including Instagram, Tumblr, and OnlyFans. OnlyFans. That's right. That is the site where men pay for typically nude pictures of strangers in the crazed belief that this monetary transaction has somehow made some sort of personal connection between the two. I explained that I love to show off the artwork on my skin, and I have no problem taking boudoir photos alone and with my friends, she said, adding that she provided an extensive list of her past and present social media accounts, provided tax statements, and paid for a criminal background check. I explained to multiple people over the course of my application that if, when my photos were to come out, there would be a teachable moment for the community and province. This screams gender inequality from all angles. Why should I be ashamed of my body and what I decide to do with it? Ingraham, who works as a barber, explained that as a small business owner and someone whose business was shut down due to COVID-19, she needed to look at other revenue streams. Having a platform to post photos and videos on that charges a subscription fee. There's something missing in this sentence. Among other features, seemed like a fast way to pay my bills and put food on my table. Although I shouldn't have to explain myself, this platform is legal. She said roughly 6 hours after the party announced she was acclaimed as a candidate and posted a headshot, she received a call from a Liberal Party contact who told her the boudoir photos had resurfaced. Ingraham said they asked if she ever had sex for money. No, I haven't, but they shouldn't have to ask, and I don't think they have the right to, she said. She said she was told to call the communications director, where she explained herself for the 10th time and told them about my mental health. She was led to believe everything was fine. But it wasn't. It wasn't fine. Not at all. Rankin's government, that would be Ian Rankin, the Premier, has previously been accused of sexism after MLA Margaret Miller resigned in May over alleged misogynistic and atrocious behavior by a recent hire in the Premier's office. Former Premier Stephen McNeil was also criticized for employing Kylie Harris, who had pleaded guilty to assaulting his partner during the last provincial election. Harris eventually stepped down. In a statement, Nicole Mosher, the Progressive Conservative candidate for Fairview Clayton Park and president of the PC Women's Caucus, said what happened to Ingraham was disturbing. A young woman was bullied by the powerful men of the Liberal Party into resigning as a Liberal candidate. Not only was Ms. Ingraham forced out as a candidate, she was also told to lie to the public about the true reason for her departure. Thousands of Nova Scotians suffer in silence from mental health challenges. Really? Do they? Is there anyone, say, under the age of 40 who does not boast frequently of their mental health problems? Excuse me. A badge of honor for millennials and those younger. The fact that Ian Rankin and his advisors thought it was convenient to blame Ms. Ingraham's departure on her past mental health challenges is not only a flagrant lie, it also trivializes the very real pain that Nova Scotians with mental illnesses face every single day. Mosher, who pointed to Rankin's 2 DUI charges from the early 2000s, said Ingraham's ousting was a double standard. We also cannot ignore how fundamentally misogynistic the Rankin Liberals have once again been exposed to be. So here we see the Conservative Party of Nova Scotia, at least one of its candidates. Yes, OnlyFans. What, are you living in the Victorian era? Do you want to cover up piano legs? It In a tweet, Claudia Chender, the incumbent NDP candidate for Dartmouth South, said she was disappointed after reading Ingraham's statement. It was good to see a candidate like Robyn put her name forward. She said, sadly, her story is not surprising. The misogyny and double standards that exist in politics and life are alive and well in Nova Scotia. She deserves better. Progressive Conservative leader Tim Houston expressed his concern when asked about the issue Thursday. He said he sees a disturbing pattern emerging. When you couple the comments from Margaret Miller, who had all kinds of concerns about misogynistic behavior in the Premier's office, there's a pattern there that people should be concerned about. New Democrat leader Gary Burrell said his party is committed to ensuring women and gender-diverse candidates are a central part of politics in the province. And I was struck by the statement by Robyn Ingraham. She wrote a letter to Premier Rankin. And of course, Dartmouth South is also referred to by some unpronounceable Indian name that fewer than 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 Indians could actually speak. I'm writing to you, and Lieutenant Governor Andrew J. LeBlanc, and Lieutenant Governor is put in scare quotes for some reason, who seems to feel threatened by a woman who isn't scared to show skin and speak her mind. To tell you a little bit about myself, the generation I come from, the error you've all made. In my humble professional and personal opinion, I believe the Liberal government has made a mistake by kicking me out of the next election. However, it did show me there still needs to be lots of changes within our government if you want to win over my generation and the youth of Nova Scotia. Some points to hold on to, she concludes. The older, whiter, and straighter your government is, the less support you'll receive from the people of unpronounceable, 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 and the rest of the province. The misogynistic behavior from those berating me online for showing off my body, something I have every right to be proud of, is not tolerable. I was told you had my back. The misogynistic behavior from those above you is not tolerable. It's not my job to make old white men feel comfortable. The woman sounds absolutely delightful, doesn't she? Let's go to the chat. Hello to Contiki Roulette and Dan and Anrun. Chokakin666 says, has there ever been an age where the most venal, mercenary, and corrupt have not risen to the commanding heights? Hello to Steve. He likes my white jacket. Chokakin666, is hair racist? Here are 10 reasons why we think so. And are these tattoos that aren't, are there tattoos that aren't hideous? I suppose it's a question of size. I mean, Victoria is a city where some people boast you can wear shorts year round. Well, you can if you're an idiot, because you'd be freezing for about 6 months of the year. But I see it all the time. And increasingly, I see men, as well as women, who have enormous tattoos, about the size of, I don't know, a newborn baby on the back of their lower legs. And the purpose of that is, hello, Jim Bowden, percentage of old people officially dead, all in their 80s and 90s. Oh, well, if we're talking about COVID-19, the average age of death here for COVID-19 is 85, which happens to be several years longer than average longevity in my country. Polygons says, LOL, imagine thinking tattoos are rebellious. Well, you know, Christopher Lash wrote about this in 1977, that the results of what the first generations of so-called child-centered child raising, that is to say, you're not supposed to be impressing upon children, you know, how to become a successful adult. And he said that the signs were not good, that the children seem to exhibit characteristics one would associate with totalitarian countries. For instance, you know, a need to be the same, and a fierce, not wanting to stand out from the group, and this fierce desire for authenticity. Yes, I am authentic because I'm covering up my God-given body, which is, in almost all cases, unique, with ink, so that they all look the same. Polygons. She probably thinks I'm such a rebel. I have tattoos and parrot what every other major corporation says on every major political and social issue. Hashtag resist. Steve says, man, how many of these stories end up with a mental health angle? All of them? All of them? Dan says, perfect for the liberals. Polygon says, she is literally cattle. Kontiki roulette, she exploits simps. I'd like to know a little bit more. I don't want to see the pictures, but I'd like to know about a little bit more about these so-called boudoir pictures that she took with her friends. The teachable moments would make a good lesbian band name, says Anran. I like that. That's very good. And Head McNeck, hello. And what does he have to say? Mental health check. It needs a reality check, says reality check. Hang on. Yeah, the problem is when I scroll down, it often jumps quite a bit. I share a pricey apartment with my brother, and he quit his job recently because he prefers vodka to being an adult. Well, that is sad to hear. I haven't seen the pictures. I don't want to see the pictures. Yes, people want to know how much she has revealed. Well, again, I don't want to. I don't want to know. Head McNeck says my Marine Corps tattoo is not hideous; it is glorious. Well, semper fi. Tattoos used to be mainly a military service thing. Also, convicts. Tattoos, and I'm excluding military men, but tattoos and shaved heads were associated with people in penitentiaries. Okay, so, okay, let me, I don't want to look at this woman anymore, so let me close these tabs. Just so sad, just so sad. Teachable moment. I mean, people are still saying that, really? Okay, so the President of the United States is a stuttering, senile buffoon. But the media doesn't seem to have any problem with that at all. How far is Biden going to go? I mean, he's not going to get any better. He's only going to get worse. When will it become permissible for the media to start asking questions about this? There was a CNN town hall yesterday, and you know that you are in serious difficulty when Don Lemon is more literate than you are. This is from Stephen Nelson at the New York Post. He's no sellout. Biden speaks to half-empty room at CNN town hall, and a picture is supplied. The more than dozen empty rows weren't apparent to television viewers thanks to flattering shots that appeared to show a full non-distance crowd packing the front rows and a striking visual display of normalcy after more than a year of COVID-19 restrictions. But members of the traveling White House press pool shared photos from the back of the room, revealing that, in fact, the venue was far from packed at Mount St. Joseph University in Cincinnati. Bloomberg News reporter Jennifer Epstein, who traveled with Biden as a representative of wire services, tweeted an image of what the Biden CNN town hall looks like from the back of the auditorium. And yes, we have many tweets of saying empty, empty, mostly empty. The image of empty seats was discordant with Biden's attempt to project confidence in overcoming the coronavirus pandemic, including his assertion that, quote, this is not a pandemic, unquote. Now, people misspeak all the time. And I guess that's what you have flax for, that, oh, what President Biden meant was when he said this is not a pandemic. How do you spin that? How can you possibly spin that? If it's not a pandemic, Why is everyone supposed to be in a state of terror still after a year and a half? The New York Post continues, it's unclear if the room was half full due to concerns about the virus or to a lack of public interest. A White House official referred an inquiry to CNN. CNN spokeswoman Lauren Pratapas told the Post this was a typical audience size for a CNN town hall. She did not elaborate on the reason for the small crowd size. Former President Donald Trump routinely mocked Biden during last year's presidential campaign for drawing small audiences, even before the pandemic, compared to his own rallies that generally featured tens of thousands of fired up fans. Now, Canada once had a prime minister called Jean Chrétien, whose spoken English was so bad that reporters resorted simply to giving paraphrases of what he said. Because, they would look at their notes or they would transcribe the recording and it made no literal sense whatsoever. But they would paraphrase this, but still put it within inverted commas so that one would have the droll experience of looking at different reporters' accounts of Chrétien making comments and finding wildly different accounts. I remember once he was campaigning at a Catholic high school in Barrie, Ontario. Why politicians campaign in high schools is a mystery to me, because they can't vote, as Peter Mannion put it on The Thick of It. He was asked a question about abortion, and what he said literally was that, as far as I could figure it out, that abortion was not really a problem for him because his wife was so old that he wouldn't be in a position to force her to have one. That was what he literally said. God knows what he meant. From a Citizen Free Press, Biden, you won't catch COVID if you get the vaccine. And again, you get the Joker face with the terribly stretched skin from the numerous plastic surgeries that he's had. He looks crazy and he talks crazy. But again, apparently the media does not want to talk about it. Let's see. He was asked, how do you change the mistrust in the system among some members of the Black community? And what he had to say, absolute gibberish. Absolute gibberish. Who knows? Who knows what it was supposed to mean? This is from Pam Key at Breitbart. And of course, Biden indulges in the meme that, American politics are more partisan and rougher than they've ever been. Are politicians challenging each other to duels as they did in the 19th century? Do fistfights break out? John Adams, he was the one who invented the rumor that Alexander Hamilton was Black. And this was not meant to praise him. Of course, Alexander Hamilton wasn't Black, but now John Adams' racial slur is the accepted wisdom. President Biden said during a town hall Wednesday on CNN that the rest of the world is wondering about the strength of the United States democracy because former President Donald Trump caused partisan political division. The party system is partisan by nature. I just can't get over. Politicians say this, reporters say this, columnists say this, professors say this. Our system is partisan. It was designed to be partisan with the idea that parties would keep other parties in line. So this is what Biden had to say. The well has been poisoned over the last 4 years. And of course, and it wasn't poisoned in the years before that. So for instance, in 2016, when we were told that Trump was worse than Hitler. And even now, there's still this lingering effort. A lot of my Republican friends, and I'm not talking about Portman, I'm talking about your governor. A lot of my Republican friends say, Joe, I know you're right, but if I do this, I'll get primaried and I'll lose my primary. I'll be in trouble. But I think that's all beginning to move. I don't mean overnight. Now, you may not like me, and that's your right. Look, it's a simple thing. You can walk out and say, tonight, I like the way that guy wears his tie. I'm voting against him. You have a right to do that. You have a right to do that. But the kinds of things that are being said of late, I think you're beginning to see some of the sort of a venom starting to leak out of a lot of it. We have to get beyond this. What do you say to your grandchildren or your children about what's happening? Do you ever remember a time like this before in the entire history, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican? This is not who we are. Of course, me reading the transcript is not very accurate because Joe was also afflicted with an extreme stutter during all this. When Barry Goldwater was running for president in 1964, a major magazine at the time ran an article where they interviewed a whole bunch of psychiatrists saying that Barry Goldwater was mentally ill, which led to a determination by the American Psychiatric Association that psychiatrists were forbidden for expressing opinions about the mental state of those that they had not personally interviewed in a professional capacity. Hey, do you remember this? Hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Yeah, senile buffoon. Presidents have been called senile buffoons before that. Of course, Nixon was a crook. Reagan was a senile buffoon. Ronnie Reagan, who was going to blow up the world for a long time, longer even than me. And he knows what he is saying is untrue, unless, of course, his memory is completely shot, which I suspect it is. Here's more wit and wisdom from Slow Uncle Joe. I've had a lot of experience internationally, and I mean not good or bad, just I have. I chaired the Foreign Relations Committee. I've been deeply involved. I did national security for our last administration with Barack. But folks, the rest of the world is wondering about us. Those of you who travel abroad, it's not a joke, not a joke. You know, when I went to this G7, all the major democracies, I walked in and I said, America's back. I'm serious, heads of state. I give you my word as a Biden. They said, are you really back? We believe you, Joe, but will the country ever get it together? I talked to Xi Jinping in China, and who I know well. We don't agree on a lot of things. He's bright and really tough guy. He believes that the 21st century will be determined by oligarchs. Democracies cannot function in the 21st century. The argument goes because things are moving so rapidly, so rapidly, that you can't pull together a nation that is divided to get the consensus on acting quickly. So autocrats, autocracies. I had a long meeting with Putin. I know him well. These guys are betting, I'm not joking, on autocracies. Democracy has to stand up to get something done. So he knows Xi Jinping well, does he? No, he doesn't. He knows Putin well, does he? No, he doesn't. If you watch any of these clips of him, you can see that his mind is frantically racing to find some sort of point where he can discuss something substantive. And he's got a phrase, like, you know, with like a terrier with a bone, that he just keeps repeating or variations on it. And then he just speaks gibberish. His mind is shot. But apparently that's not a problem for the journalists, for the elite of the United States of America. And Old Slow Joe had some amusing things to say about inflation. So inflation is rising in the United States. People are worried about it. Of course, inflation is much higher than the official figures because lots of things that people need to buy or do buy, such as real estate and healthcare and post-secondary education, they're not counted in the basket. So what's the solution for inflation? To inflate the money supply. Yes, seriously, that is what Joe Biden said. The solution to inflation is more inflation. You see, it all balances out. This is from Will Fire at the New York Post. President Biden on Wednesday night again rejected concerns that inflation could be more severe and longer lasting than previously thought, even as a chorus of voices on Wall Street have begun to accept that recent price spikes could stick around. Danielle Lippy, a student and registered Republican, asked Biden about the latest inflation data. Are you concerned about the higher inflation prices, especially as we see gasoline, automotive, and food prices increase rapidly? What is your administration doing to help prevent the economy from overheating, such as the poor and middle class are not hurt by the higher prices of goods in the long run? Biden reiterated, or repeated, as others might say, what the White House and Federal Reserve officials have been saying for months: the prices are expected to rise as the economy thaws from the pandemic, but inflation won't last long as supply chain kinks and shortages are worked out. The vast majority of the experts, including Wall Street, are suggesting that it's highly unlikely there's going to be long-term inflation that's going to get out of hand. There will be near-term inflation because everything is now trying to be picked back up. The president added that it's good news that the economy is picking up significantly. He noted that any comparisons of prices today to prices 1 year ago are going to be warped because at this time last year, the pandemic had gutted the economy, driving prices to record low levels. Well, it wasn't the pandemic that gutted the economy. It was the panic, the hysteria, the terror. It's rational when you think about it. The cost of an automobile is kind of back to what it was before the pandemic. While some goods, the president said, did see massive drops in prices during the pandemic and are just now returning to pre-pandemic levels, that's not the case for cars, which have driven some of the largest inflation jumps in recent months. Okay. Don Lemon pressed Biden on whether massive federal spending could exacerbate inflation further, and Biden pointed to a recent Moody's report released Wednesday. Worries that the plan will ignite undesirably high inflation and overheating economy are overdone, said Chief Economist Mark Zandi. This concern cannot be dismissed, but is likely misplaced. Biden's dismissal of inflation echoes comments made by Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. And so Biden decides to talk about the price of wood, say, how it's exploded, but you're just not going to last, right? He can't make sense about anything that he says. And of course, the very idea, this was an argument that was settled in the 1970s and 80s. It is expansion of the money supply that increases inflation. It is not workers asking for higher wages, because the workers are asking for higher wages typically because the increase in prices due to inflation has meant that their standard of living has fallen significantly. They are not driving it. Wages are not driving it. Here's something from Hannah Blow at Breitbart. Dozens of fully vaccinated people in New Jersey have died of the Chinese coronavirus, according to the state's Department of Health. That's not supposed to happen. That is not supposed to happen. Joe Biden, the president of the United States, says that it wasn't happening. That if you were vaccinated, fully vaccinated, you would not get COVID-19, let alone die of it. Governor Phil Murphy announced Monday that vaccines in New Jersey were proving to be 99.9% effective in the Garden State, reporting 84 breakthrough hospitalizations and 31 deaths among the vaccinated. But this week, a state health official confirmed that 49 people who were fully vaccinated have died of the virus as of July the 12th. More than half of those had underlying health conditions. Donna Lusner, a spokeswoman for the state Department of Health, told NJ.com it remains clear how many fatalities, if any, are connected to nursing homes, but all of them occurred in people over the age of 50. All of the deaths were people over age 50, with 30 of them over age 80, and 13 of them were between the ages of 65 and 79. How about that? What does that tell you? We've known this from the very beginning, but I don't know. The elite has decided to lie about it. Masks. You remember the days when we all had to wear masks, sometimes even outside? Those were halcyon days, weren't they? We all look back. Remember those mask days? Man, those mask days, they were so much fun. This is from Charlie Spearing at Breitbart. The White House scolded Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida Thursday for refusing to enact mask mandates for children younger than 12 years old as they return to school. If I were a parent in Florida, that would be greatly concerning to me, White House Press Secretary not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki said during the daily press briefing. DeSantis announced Thursday he will not set mask mandates for children in the Florida school system. We're not doing that. In Florida, he said, we need our kids to breathe. Psaki responded with a personal example of the mask-wearing habits of her own children. We know masks are not the most comfortable thing, she admitted. I will say my kids are quite adjusted to them, as I know many kids are. Yes. Is that the world you want to live in? Where children, down to 3-year-olds, are comfortable wearing masks everywhere? Jen Psaki made a Twilight reference yesterday, that some of us are on team Twilight character, some of us are on team Twilight character, but we all need to be on team vaccine. We have a 12-year-old girl who's the press secretary to the president of the United States. We want kids to be able to be kids, DeSantis said. We want them to be able to breathe. It's terribly uncomfortable for them to do it. There's not very much science behind it. Biden said during his town hall that he expects the Centers for Disease Control to require mask mandates for children returning to school. So does the CDC have plenary power over the schools of the United States of America? He also warned parents of kids older than 12 that they need to vaccinate their kids. It's going to get a little bit tight in terms of, well, are mom and dad being honest that Johnny did or did not get vaccinated? Biden said that's going to raise questions. Ooh, are these people going to be outed by their children, perhaps? Yes. Very Soviet, this debate has become. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, the Washington Post, top White House aides and Biden administration officials are debating whether they should urge vaccinated Americans to wear masks in more settings as the Delta variant causes spikes in coronavirus infections across the country, according to 6 people familiar with the discussions. Once again, I will remind you all that we were promised by Joe Biden and by Justin Trudeau and by Boris Johnson that when, people start getting vaccinated, particularly the most vulnerable, then life can go back to normal. And apparently life is never going to go back to normal because apparently people are still getting sick. Yes. This is from WRCB TV. Young people intubated with COVID-19 should be a gigantic wake-up call, Alabama doctor says. Health experts say they're concerned about the next chapter in the pandemic. Wait, there's no pandemic. Biden said there was no pandemic. Stop pushing out this misinformation, especially for younger Americans who they say are feeling the impacts. They are just lying to us nonstop now. Oh, yes. Let's see what Andrew Coyne, Canada's premier conservative or right-wing columnist has to say. Vaccine mandates are not a hill to die on, literally or figuratively. Around the world, COVID-19 cases are skyrocketing again thanks to the emergence of the highly contagious Delta variant. Among the hardest hit, surprisingly, are the countries that famously had the fastest rates of vaccination in the early going. What does that tell you, Andrew Coyne, about the efficacy of these vaccines, which are not vaccines as vaccines have been traditionally understood, but experimental gene therapy? Just a month ago, Israel seemed to have beaten the virus with an average of fewer than 3 new cases per day per million population. As of this week, it has risen to 109. In the United States, likewise, the number of new cases tripled in the last month to 105 per million, while in the United Kingdom, which was averaging just 22 new cases per million 2 months ago is now closing in around 700. Does that mean that vaccinations are useless against the disease? Of course not. It means that vaccinations are not enough. Not certainly until herd immunity has been reached, the proportion of the population in which the virus starts to run out of fresh victims. Until then, it will continue to spread among the unvaccinated. And since no vaccine is 100% effective, among the vaccinated as well, which means other measures, including masks and physical distancing, will still be needed. At higher infection rates, moreover, and the Delta variants is much higher than earlier incarnations of the virus, the threshold for herd immunity will be correspondingly higher. So then he talks about these terrible, terrible people who will not be vaccinated. I understand that purely coercive measures, making it illegal not to be vaccinated, are unlikely to succeed. Note that he doesn't rule it out. And I can see the appeal of incentive-based approaches, such as some provinces are enacting, enrolling every vaccinated person in a lottery, for example. Yes, just like Indira Gandhi giving transistor radios to Indian men who had been sterilized. How is this any different? Offering people bribes to take an experimental medicine, offering people bribes, along with the coercion that you were a very, very bad person and you're not going to be able to do anything. So what I find hard to understand is why this should be to the exclusion of other approaches in between the two. I'm speaking of regulations that would make participation in certain social settings, work, study, leisure, commerce, any that involve close contact with large number of people, conditional on vaccination. And of course, this is in no way coercive, in no way in opposition, in violation of the Nuremberg Code on experimental medicine. Whether they are called vaccine certificates, vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, they are a useful combination of carrot and stick. I yield to no one in my crankish resistance to nanny state intrusions on personal liberty. Oh, just shut the hell up. These people have got to the state now where they no longer know the difference between truth and lies. The imposition is slight and hardly unusual. Yes, okay. On his Twitter feed today, he reprinted a public health warning that told parents not to take children with diarrhea to swimming pools. This is what he's comparing it to. This is what Andrew Coyne is comparing it to. The imposition is slight. Oh, is it now? Is it now? We don't know. We don't know if the imposition is slight. The evidence on that has not yet been collected. More vaccines, more and more and more. This is from Robert Hart at Forbes. Amid rising cases of COVID-19 driven by the infectious Delta variant, Israel is gearing up to host the first clinical trials of an oral COVID-19 vaccine, which could help boost access to vaccines around the world and serve as a more convenient booster in the future. And more news from Israel, from the Jerusalem Post, Mayan Jaffe Hoffman. Some existing redacted could stop COVID at almost 100%. A Hebrew University of Jerusalem research team found 18 redacted that they felt could be redacted in the treatment of patients who contract COVID-19. I use this word redacted because apparently the Jerusalem Post can write about this, but I can't say it on YouTube. The reflexive decision of the medical establishment to reject out of hand all possible off-the-shelf treatments of COVID-19 has resulted quite possibly in the deaths, unnecessary deaths of millions of people. I wonder if they'll be held responsible for this. This is from Reuters. Pingdemic grips Britain as fears of food shortages grow. Record numbers of people were pinged by the NHS COVID-19 contact tracing app, asking them to isolate. British minister, we're concerned about pingdemic. Food supplies could fail, meat industry says. Iceland, that's a grocery store chain, closes some stores due to staff shortages. Sainsbury's says customers may not get exact product they want. BP says some sites temporarily closed due to lack of fuel. So now we're going to go through spring 2020 again because of an app. And speaking, oh yes, an excellent op-ed by Peggy Grande in the Daily Express in London. Don't celebrate the end of lockdown. Be angry it was ever there at all. She begins, yet for being one united collection of states, COVID has certainly divided the U.S. By contrast, for those in blue states, led by Democrat governors, life has been seemingly reluctant to return to that same semblance of normalcy. In part, this is due to restrictions still imposed by those in leadership, and in equal part due to the reluctance of those citizens to let go of the fear which has been programmed into them and has paralyzed the part of their brain where common sense and logic resides. Yet the most frightening trend I see as coronavirus restrictions continue to lift is the tendency for people to show gratitude for these additional freedoms. I am not grateful, I am outraged, and you should be too. We should not be grateful for our liberties being restored. We should be furious that we ever allowed our liberties to be taken from us in the first place. Our freedoms are just that, ours. They are not to be doled out to us like a weekly allowance from the government. They are God-given, inalienable, and in the United States are constitutionally protected. How we ever gave in to surrendering them without a fight is a question we all must answer for ourselves and should already be thinking about how we will handle it differently next time. Unfortunately, I fear there will be a next time. With a power-hungry left in charge, they have seen how convenient it is to rule over us in a pandemic where every bit of suppression of our independence can be blamed on health, on safety, on protecting others. If you don't comply, you are shamed and proclaimed guilty as charged. You must hate the elderly or be a racist or both. If you don't obey, you must not believe in their version of science. You must be rebellious not to comply with taking the vaccine, or must be a selfish person who doesn't care about others. In the UK, public policy has been ceded to unelected scientists whose motives are unknown, but whose politics in many cases are known. And they aren't advocates for liberty. These people should not be dictating anything to society. Their default end is to use their science to justify saying no to all freedoms. Instead, they should be advising and advocating for safe pathways to yes. The science is in and is overwhelmingly clear. Lockdowns don't slow the spread or stop the virus. They should end, not continue to be advanced. As I've been saying since, February of last year, if these lockdowns were to be serious, well, everyone would be locked into their place, into their apartments, into their homes. No one would be allowed to go to work. Food would be delivered by armies dressed in hazmat suits. But no, it's on and off, on and off, on and off. And there's just no end to it. And in Australia, we have a country which absolutely panics with one new case. That's what we've been reduced to. Let's go to Lockdown Skeptics, which is now called dailyskeptic.org. Christian organization tells the unvaccinated they're not welcome. This would be the United Beach Mission. Okay. Vaccination of 12-year-old Australians likely to be given go-ahead within days. Oh, the red screen of death, deceptive site ahead. Firefox blocked this page because it may trick you into doing something dangerous like installing software or revealing personal information like passwords or credit cards. Advisory provided by Google Safe Browsing. DailySkeptic.org has been reported as a deceptive site. You can report a detection problem or ignore the risk and go to this unsafe site. Learn more about deceptive sites and phishing at www.antifishing.org. Learn more about Firefox's phishing and malware protection at support.mozilla.org. Some of our readers may have noticed a couple of days ago that our post entitled "The BBC versus Trump" Not for the sake of clarity, the full article of the same name by Freddie Attenborough elicited an excited reaction from their web browser, the red screen of death. Google had decided that our website was doing something nefarious. And even though they couldn't manage to be specific about what it was, and even though they sent me an email alert, nevertheless, when I loaded their helpful webpage and dug into the details, they only told me that the reason was not available. They suggested we were possibly running a phishing scam or maybe running malware. They couldn't be precise, but they made certain that our readers knew about it. Nice of them. But besides making it very difficult for our readers to view our website, or at least that particular page, the repercussions included the inability to forward our email newsletter to others, the inability to post links on other sites. A reader couldn't post a link to the site under an article in the Times, for instance, and even comically, at least to me, antivirus alerts from McAfee, all very troubling from a webmaster, I'm sure. But I knew from the moment I got the email alert from Google that it was almost certainly bunk. How big a problem is scientific fraud? Earlier this month, the British Medical Journal published a blog post by former editor Richard Smith entitled "Time to Assume that Health Research is Fraudulent Until Proven Otherwise." The conclusion was essentially yes. Today, we're publishing an original piece by Mike Hearn looking at fraud and other problems besetting scientific research. Mike is a regular contributor to Lockdown Skeptics and the author of the site's most read article in its 16-month history. Well, yes, it's been known for years that lots of claims made by scientists can't be replicated. In some fields, the majority of all claims appear to not replicate due to a large mix of issues like overly lax thresholds for claiming statistical significance, poor study design, and other somewhat subtle errors. But how much research is deliberate falsehood? The sad truth is the size of the fraud problem is entirely unknown because the institutions of science have absolutely no mechanisms to detect bad behavior whatsoever. Academia is dominated by and largely originated by the same ideology calling for the total defunding of the police, so no surprise that they just assume everyone has absolute integrity all the time. Research claims are constantly accepted at face value, even when obviously nonsensical or fake. Deceptive research sails through peer review, gets published, cited, and then incorporated into decision-making. There are no rules, and it'd be pointless to make any because there's nobody to enforce them. Universities are notorious for solidly defending fraudulent professors. So let's turn over the rock and see what crawls out. We'll start with China and then turn our attention back to more Western types of deception. Mike goes on to describe a phenomenon I wasn't aware of, namely the prevalence of fraudulent medical papers by Chinese doctors. In 2018, the U.S. National Science Foundation announced that, quote, for the first time, China has overtaken the United States in terms of the total number of science publications. Should the USA worry about this? Perhaps not. After some bloggers exposed an industrial research faking operation that had generated at least 600 papers about experiments that never happened, a Chinese doctor reached out to beg for mercy. Hello, teacher. Today you disclosed that there were some doctors having fraudulent pictures in their papers. This has raised attention. As one of these doctors, I kindly ask you to please leave us alone as soon as possible. Without papers, you don't get promotion. Without a promotion, you can hardly feed your family. You expose us, but there are thousands of other people doing the same. As long as the system remains the same and the rules of the game remain the same, similar acts of faking data are for sure to go on. This time you exposed us, probably costing us our job. For the sake of Chinese doctors as a whole, especially for us young doctors, please be considerate. We really have no choice. Please, unquote. Yes, it's my default position that I don't want to purchase anything from China. Zero. Because it's rubbish, and they don't care that it's rubbish. And what else do we have here? Oh, Brits told top keep life moving by wearing face masks in new government scare campaign. Let's keep life moving with fresh air, testing, face coverings, app, and hand washing. And of course, they all have pictograms because the assumption is that a large number of Britons no longer know how to read English. So much for Freedom Day. Peter Hitchens points to a poster that he saw, presumably on the tube in London, COVID-19, let's wear face coverings in crowded places to protect others. COVID-19 is still with us. Even if you've been vaccinated, you can still get the virus and still pass it on. Let's keep protecting each other. Let's keep life moving. Hitchens commented, they never give up. Full page propaganda advertisement today. Mask wearers, in my experience, need no encouragement. So what's the aim? Record 619,000 people in England and Wales pinged last week. Police response times under strain because of staff shortages called by pingdemic. I think we may have lost the capacity for self-government. In fact, I'm pretty well sure of it. And as always, we end this segment with Alex Berenson's Twitter page. I suspect the increasingly panicked and angry response I and other vaccine realists are seeing is coming because the folks who know the numbers well are starting to understand we're right and are looking for someone to blame. Everyone else just doesn't have a clue. Oh, 4 reasons I'm wearing a mask again. I guess you could choose one of these 4. 1, I'm scared. 2, I believe in magic. 3, I work for the Atlantic. Or 4, I love public virtue signals. About the whole vaccines don't stop transmission, but they stop severe disease thing. Numbers of new severe cases in Israel, where 95% of the population over 60 and 80 plus over 20 and 80% over 20 is fully vaccinated. Week of 622 to 629, 3. Week of 715 to 721, 81. That is a mere 2,600% increase. Okay, I see, Berenson writes, I'm a bit thick, so riddle me this. If lockdowns were good last July and vaccines are good now, was off the charts rate of hospitalizations in the UK, of deaths in the UK in January due to lockdown, or the first dose vaccine in the vulnerable? So confusing. If you're going to play anecdotes, make you a murderer, a favorite game of the people yelling at me. This unvaccinated person died of COVID and it's your fault. I'll be happy to scream right back. You vaccine fanatics killed this man. I get lots of them. So stupid. Just stop. None of this was unpredictable. In fact, some of us have been predicting it in writing all year. Warp speed, baby. You want it bad, you get it bad. And I'm pleased to say that if you go back to my live streams to the time that President Trump first announced warp speed, I said, this is a very bad idea. You don't rush out experimental treatments without fully testing them. And Berenson points out that if vaccines worked the way that they were hyped to do, then when he goes on Tucker Carlson's show, they'd just be talking about, adverse reactions. You wouldn't be talking about the efficacy of the vaccine itself. Let's go back to the chat. Okay, Shogun 666. I ordered Colgate tooth powder and it's made in India. No one uses tooth powder anymore except Indians. I didn't even know that still existed. My ibuprofen was made in China. They probably, yeah, it says Gamian. No, I don't trust any of this stuff, and I don't want it. I've had just from buying things from Amazon. Oh yes, I need a new remote for my amplifier because the old remote has stopped working. Oh, well, look, here's a new remote and it only costs $12 or whatever. And of course it doesn't work. Oh, well, there's also, let's go to Walmart and buy cheap clothes. Look, here's a pair of jeans for $20. Yes, and the third time after you take it out of the dryer, after the third wash, you find that the crotch has already started to fail. It's a false economy. Delta Dawn, what's that flower you have on? It's death, says Chogokin 666. Rescue Steve says it's the all the eggs must be saved femininity that has infected the governments. It all started with bicycle helmet mandates, and it went from there. Well, you notice how child rearing has changed. Parents are rather terrified, about their children. That children like to run. They learn how to walk, and so we're going to run. And so child wants to run on the sidewalk. Well, there's a pretty good chance they're going to fall. Maybe they'll just scrape their knees or their elbow, but there's also a chance they might smack their head. And then if they take the child to the emergency room, they're terrified that they're going to be accused of child abuse, because it's simply unacceptable that a child might bash its head. Gamian says, God, how I miss the pre-mass insanity, pre-open imposition of control by the elites. Don Willis says, I think Paul McCartney's group Wings was underrated. Well, you know what Alan Partridge said of Wings? He said it was the band the Beatles could have been, which is one of the funniest things that I have ever heard. Don Willis says, it's never enough. Erasing history, not enough. Getting rid of police, not enough. Yada, yada, yada. Yes, there's a rude joke here made about Jen Psaki. Mask use is coming back in New York City, says Glib Medley. Claudius Augustus played the fool, but he was brilliant, says Chogokin 666. Yeah, I wonder about this. I just wonder how much we really know about any of these Julio-Claudian emperors. A lot of it seems to be, prurience, sensationalism, settling scores, in the history. Ed McNeck says, I know it's basically a joke at this point, but it bears repeating. Who the hell is actually in charge of the executive branch right now? Is it like Churchill's, what is this, focus? Is it just tech oligarchs? I just... it would be very amusing to be in the same room with Biden's handlers when he does something like this CNN town hall last night. I'm just imagining, what their dry cleaning bills for all the clothes that they sweat through every day when Biden opens his mouth, or it just, no, I can't take this to the dry cleaners. It's gone. I'll just have to throw it away and buy a new shirt and, a new jacket. But nope. This is a good one from Jim Bowden. Joe Biden is the first president to be elected from a basement. Oscar Toe says, I love how the GOP has to have like a completely perfect candidate to win the presidency now, but the Democrats can put in a random old Senile guy. Yeah. Of course, in a certain sense, it's amusing, but I don't know. There's also the possibility that Biden might decide to use nuclear weapons on Ecuador or some such place for reasons that would be impossible to figure out. So let's go back to Hilaire Belloc's The Servile State, and we are now into the last chapter. The Servile State has begun. And he begins, just let me increase the typeface size. In this last division of my book, I deal with the actual appearance of the servile state and certain laws and proposals now familiar to the industrial society of modern England. These are patent objects, laws, and projects of laws which lend stuff to my argument and show that it is based not upon a mere deduction, but upon an observation of things. Two forms of this proof are evident. First, the laws and proposals which subject the proletariat to servile conditions. Next, the fact that the capitalist, so far from being expropriated by modern socialist experiments, is being confirmed in his power. I take these in their order, and I begin by asking in what statutes or proposals the servile state first appeared among us. A false conception of our subject might lead one to find the origins of the servile state in the restrictions imposed upon certain forms of manufacture and the corresponding duties laid upon the capitalist in the interest of his workmen. The factory laws, as they are in this country, would seem to offer upon this superficial and erroneous view a starting point. They do nothing of the kind, and the view is superficial and erroneous because it neglects the fundamentals of the case. What distinguishes the servile state is not the interference of law with the action of any citizen, even in connection with industrial matters. Such interference may or may not indicate the presence of servile status. It in no way indicates the presence of that status when it forbids a particular kind of human action to be undertaken by the citizen as a citizen. The legislator says, for instance, you may pluck roses, but as I notice that you sometimes scratch yourself, I will put you in prison unless you cut them with scissors at least 122 millimeters long, and I will appoint 1,000 inspectors to go around the country seeing whether the law is observed. My brother-in-law shall be at the head of the department at £2,000 a year. We are all familiar with that type of legislation. We are all familiar with the arguments for and against it in a particular case. We may regard it as onerous, futile, or beneficent, or in any other light, according to our various temperaments. But it does not fall within the category of servile legislation because it establishes no distinction between two classes of citizens, marking off the one as legally distinct from the other by a criterion of manual labor or of income. This is even true of such regulations as those which compel a cotton mill, for instance, to have no less than such and such an amount of cubic space for each operative and such protection for dangerous machinery. These laws do not concern themselves with the nature, the amount, or even the existence of a contract for service. The object, for example, of the law which compels one to fence off certain types of machinery is simply to protect human life, regardless of whether the human being so protected is rich or poor, capitalist or proletarian. These laws may in effect work in our society so that the capitalist is made responsible for the proletarian, but he is not responsible qua capitalist, nor is the proletarian protected qua proletarian. In the same way, the law may compel me, if I am a riparian owner, to put up a fence of statutory strength wherever the water of my river is of more than a statutory depth. Now, it cannot compel me to do this unless I am the owner of the land. In a sense, therefore, this might be called the recognition of my status, because by the nature of the case, only land owners can be affected by the law, and landowners would be compelled by it to safeguard the lives of all, whether they were or were not owners of land. But the category so established would be purely accidental. The object and method of the law do not concern themselves with the distinction between citizens. A close observer might indeed discover certain points in the factory laws, details and phrases, which did distinctly connote the existence of a capitalist and of a proletarian class. But we must take the statutes as a whole and the order in which they were produced, above all, the general motive and expressions governing each main statute, in order to judge whether such examples of interference give us an origin or not. The verdict will be that they do not. Such legislation may be oppressive in any degree or necessary in any degree, but it does not establish status in the place of contract, and it is not, therefore, servile. Neither are those laws servile, which in practice attach to the poor and not to the rich. Compulsory education is in legal theory required of every citizen for his children. The state of mind which goes with plutocracy exempts, of course, all above a certain standard of wealth from this law. But the law does apply to the universality of the Commonwealth, and of all families resident in Great Britain, though not in Ireland, are subject to its provisions. These are not origins. A true origin to the legislation I approach comes later. The first example of servile legislation is to be discovered upon the statute book is that which establishes the present form of employer's liability. I'm far from saying that that law was passed, as modern laws are beginning to be passed, with the direct object of establishing a new status, although it was passed with some consciousness on the part of the legislator that such a new status was in existence as a social fact. Its motive was merely humane, and the relief which it afforded seemed merely necessary at the time, but it is an instructive example of the way in which a small neglect of strict doctrine and a slight toleration of anomaly admit great changes into the state. And I will have more from the final chapter of Hilaire Belloc's The Servile State tomorrow. There is a long piece at the Daily Mail, which I commend to you. It is called "The Author Brave Enough to Take on the Trans Lobby. New book warns that children are forcibly sterilized, women are at risk of rape, and doctors are terrorized as a result of people being allowed to choose their own gender." Author Helen Joyce's Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality explores activism, discusses gender self-identification, the idea people should count as men or women according to how they feel instead of their biology. Joyce warns the concept could lead to the destruction of women's rights. She said that puberty blockers could lead to the sterilization of non-conforming children. She also said it could lead to the corruption of medical and scientific research. Author and journalist Helen Joyce, who is Britain editor for The Economist, has written this book. And yes, let's talk about prisons. I mean, prison is a miserable enough place without admitting people who claim to women's prisons, who claim that they are women. Joyce documents how male predators who identify as transgender can pose a threat to female inmates if moved into women's prisons. Pictured, Karen White was born a man, but despite having a history of sex attacks, was placed in women's prison HMP New Hall after telling authorities of his identification as a woman. They went on to sexually assault two inmates. But I suppose the sexual assault of women that to whom the state owes a duty of care is as nothing compared to the hurt feelings of a person not being able to identify as a woman. Because make no mistake, this is what this comes down to: hurt feelings. Speaking at an event in 2016, Diane Arensaf, the director of the University of California, San Francisco Children's Hospital Gender Clinic, claimed that even a toddler can indicate a trans identity to parents. She said that they were able to communicate their trans feelings with non-verbal gender messages. Joyce writes, "One born male may unpop the fasteners on a bodysuit to make it look like a dress. One born female may pull out hair clips." She claims that children know if they are transgender by the second year of life. In fact, they probably know before that, but that's pre-verbal. She has encouraged parents to socially transition children as young as 3. After researching several parent support groups on Facebook, Joyce found there were discussions about buying prosthetic penises and underpants which squash the genitals between the legs for toddlers. Well, as I said before, the society in which we live is unsustainable. The only question is when it's going to collapse and how much it can be clawed back from the wreckage. The second year of life. In the second year of life, children know nothing. Zero. They're dinosaur brains. But apparently they do know if they are trans. Let's talk about some wicked people. Let's talk about big agriculture. And the New York Times, of course, is in favor of everything big. You know, big tech, big global companies, military industrial complex. The New York Times loves all that stuff. This is a piece that appeared yesterday called "Why Rural America Needs Immigrants." And it is by Robert Leonard and Matt Russell. Leonard is the author of Deep Midwest, Midwestern Explorations. Russell is a co-owner of Coyote Run Farm. Knoxville, Iowa. Dateline, rural America has a growth problem. Business and industry desperately needs workers, but the domestic labor pool is shallow, and the nation's birth rate is slowing. There's no better place to help expand our economy than in rural communities like ours. We need smart public policy for sustained growth, and immigration reform would be a big part of it. Well, as Edward Abbey said, you know, growth for its own sake is the ideology of the cancer cell. And this coalition between big business and libertarianism is, well, wicked. Because the problem is that Americans want to earn more than they're earning. And we can't have that. They can't have that in America because it would mean slightly smaller profits for big ag. So what you got to do is bring in foreigners because they'll accept pretty much anything. The Iowa Business Council, a group made up of representatives of the largest corporations in the state, has been asking for immigration reform for years to help solve our labor woes. Pay your employees more money. Plenty of research shows that flexible visa programs run federally or by the states could address the problem quickly. Yes, bring them into the United States, and they're supposed to be temporary, but they never leave. Help wanted signs are all around town. There are help wanted ads playing on our local radio station, our local newspapers, and all over the internet. Listen to your favorite national podcast here, and you might hear a targeted help wanted ad for our zip code. Our county, Marion, is blessed with a strong agricultural manufacturing base and is doing relatively well. The median household income in the county is $61,038, just a notch before the state median of $62,843. About 8% of us live in poverty. Dave Swenson, an economist at Iowa State University, agrees that the reason we have so many jobs open is that we don't have enough people to fill them, or alternately, that you're not paying them enough money. One of the bright spots in the Iowa economy is the fact that the ag sector seems to be thriving, especially in animal production and in food production. They will not thrive and grow if they are not able to continue to attract and retain immigrant labor. And what are the costs, the secondary costs? Oh, these people pay taxes. How much do they pay in taxes compared to what they get, say, in federal benefits? What about the other costs, the policing costs? The costs for trials, costs for prisons, for social workers. What about costs that can't be measured, such as the destruction of community? What about those costs? They're not interested in those costs. They're not interested in those costs at all because they don't pay those costs. The rest of us pay the costs that globalism incurs. I just want to, I'm just going to look something up here. And yes, John Milius. John Milius famously had to say about Rush Limbaugh. Milius is identified as a right-winger, which he is, but he is not a globalist. And he has, he's not very big on big business and its demands. And what did he have to, I want to get the exact quotation here, okay? This is what Milius said. I was watching Rush Limbaugh, and I should, this is shortly after the economic collapse of the last decade. So Milius says, I was watching Rush Limbaugh the other night and I was horrified. I would have Rush Limbaugh drawn and quartered. He was sticking up for these Wall Street pigs. There should be public show trials, mass denunciations, and executions. Ah, yes, a man after my own heart. And, oh, did you know that there's a housing shortage in Canada? Do you know that despite the fact that Canada is effectively bankrupt, that the price of housing continues to soar? Well, people have noticed this. The Liberal Party has noticed it. The Conservative Party has noticed it. Heather Schofield writes in the Toronto Star, it was almost a flashback to the election campaign of 2019. Justin Trudeau was out in Hamilton and Brampton this week announcing hundreds of millions of dollars in government funding for affordable housing. The NDP is complaining it's just not enough, and the Conservatives are saying he's doing it all wrong. The housing issue has not gone away despite all the commitments of 2 years ago, and for young people in particular, it's even harder to afford a home now than it was during the last campaign. Golly, why might that be? But it's a political and economic challenge that's too important for cynical voters to dismiss the politicians' proposals as the same old, same old. As the Star's Tess Kalinowski reported this week, a new study commissioned by the Toronto Region Board of Trade and Wood Green Community Services shows that expensive housing squeezes out middle-class and low-income workers, costs billions in lost productivity and commuting, pressures employers to offer wage premiums. Oh, no, we can't have that, to keep their workforce intact, and deters newcomers from moving here. I guess it was in the middle 80s that Prime Minister Brian Mulroney pegged immigration to Canada at a minimum of 250,000 a year. And what would the population of Canada have been in 1985? Well, it would have been under 30 million, certainly. Today it's 38 million. It is immigration that is largely, in the main, responsible for the fact that Canadians cannot afford housing. And this woman, Schofield, has the nerve to say that high housing prices deter newcomers from moving here. Newcomers. Yes. Guess what? The word immigration does not appear in her column. She's gaslighting us. They are all gaslighting us. If these people were truly concerned with making housing affordable again, they would immediately declare an immigration moratorium. Canada is full. We don't need any more people. Let's see. I wanted to talk about the California dream being dying. Let's go with that briefly. A piece by Connor of Friedersdorf in The Atlantic. The California dream is dying, and we've talked about this on the live stream. We've gone into all of the indicators. He makes the point, Friedersdorf makes the point that, for the California dream to die in some way means that the American dream would be dead. I don't know. California obviously has very little in common with most of the landmass of the United States now, and this is a state where the governor boasts of the number of billionaires, whereas the homeless encampments run for miles and mile after mile after mile after mile in Los Angeles. But we have some gloom and doom here from Friedersdorf, and he is pretty black-pilled about the future of California. And the tremendous divide between the poor and the rich in California. And California is a state which is, it's run for the rich now. There's no other way. Increasingly, the view in California amongst the elite is, if you're bitching about not being able to afford a place, say, and assuming you're not a member of a minority group or whatever, well, you should have picked richer parents. This is really the way they look at it. This is a very, very long piece by Friedersdorf, a deep dish, as they used to say. But let's get to his conclusion here. Californians must turn away from the wishful thinking and preservationists towards a future it could enjoy. Success will not mean perfection nor an end to hardship or challenges, but it will have been achieved if a chronicler at California's bicentennial can approvingly quote the summation of the Golden State that Carrie McWilliams offered to mark its centennial. This then is California in 1948, a century after the gold rush, still growing rapidly, still the pace setter, falling all over itself, stumbling pell-mell to greatness without knowing the way, bursting at every seam. California is not another state. It is a revolution within the states. Okay. Is growth at any cost? Is that a good thing? Is it revolution a good thing? Friedersdorf concludes the rising generations change, whether on behalf of the country, the blue state model of the tens of millions who make their home in the state, is to make California exceptional again. And the elite in California does not seem to have made the connection, or perhaps they have, which is more sinister. We need more people from Mexico and Central America. Why? wages too high for ordinary people? In the state not environmentally degraded enough? That California is running out of water, right? So let's just bring in more people. They claim to care about, the fight against mankind's eternal enemy, carbon, but it is well known, it is a cliche, that when you take people from poor countries and move them to rich countries, their carbon footprint becomes much, much bigger. There's a piece by B. Duncan Mensch in the tablet, Americans Hate Each Other. It's time to embrace what that means for the country's future. And look at some big thinking here. Big thinking, and the big thinking is the real, okay, let me go to the paragraph before that. Perhaps a version of Michael Lynn's liberal nationhood was possible back when Barack Obama took office in 2009, but Trump's 2016 election should have illustrated the extent of Obama's failure to reconstruct New Deal-level social safety nets, move the country past race, and mount a sustained attack on corporate power. Instead of FDR 2.0, which most of America was ready for by 2008, the country witnessed the birth of woke corporatism with Obama as condescending frontman. The result was the entrenchment of racial division and racialist doctrines, along with the exponential growth of corporate power and oligarchical wealth. So if the dream of rebuilding America around notions of liberal nationhood is likely a mirage, if postmodern multicultural nationalism has clearly failed, and if rebuilding a more hard-edged version of U.S. nationhood around Trump, Reagan, and Trump-style nostalgia for the Anglo-American past remains repugnant, what then? The answer is separation. Red and blue America finally accept for the past 60 years they've grown irreconcilably apart, and that they are in fact separate nations, each worthy and deserving of independence from the other. Dissolve the United States, I say, and start an American union that works more like its European counterpart. The breakup, in fact, has already begun. In June, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis sued the federal government and the Centers for Disease Control over COVID-related restrictions preventing the cruise ship industry from reopening. DeSantis also recently sent Florida state troopers to the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas and Arizona at the request of the governors there. Not long after, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem followed suit. In the same month, 5 rural Oregon counties voted in favor of joining Idaho. The plan for a greater Idaho also includes 6 counties in Northern California that fancied themselves as a breakaway state of Jefferson. And if you've never read about the state of Jefferson, you should. It's fascinating stuff. A few weeks later, 11 heavily armed men wearing tactical gear were arrested in a standoff with police on Interstate 95 in Massachusetts. The group holds to the Moorish sovereign ideology, believing that the United States has no right to force them to adhere to any laws. One of the members could be heard challenging the fictions of America's racial pentagon, declaring, "I'm not black, I'm not Hispanic, I'm not Latin American, I am a Moors national." Another member of the group proclaimed America's 13th and 14th Amendments fictitious entities. I don't know how long it'd be. There's been talk about the breakup of the United States for the last few years, but sometimes these things happen quickly. Sometimes they take a long time. And of course, sometimes they don't happen at all. But again, I will commend this article to you. It is in the tabletmag.com, Americans Hate Each Other, by B. Duncan Mensch, Mench. So we're moving on to Theater Thursday. And so you will bear with me when I open the many tabs, which I have collected to help me explain this movie, which is co-written and directed by Max Ophuls. And it is a adaptation of Arthur Schnitzler's play Reigen. And Reigen means, well, it means around, like a dance or a musical genre. And This movie, well, what's it about? It's about sex. I mean, we hear a lot about love in the movie, but it is about sex. Let's make no mistake about that. The movie makes the argument, like the play, but in a somewhat different way, that love is or rather sex, is a more powerful force than class. Max Oppenheimer was born in 1902 and died in 1957. He changed his name to Ophuls, ostensibly because his father was a rich industrialist and he didn't want his career in the arts to be embarrassing for him. He was born in Saarbrücken and died in Hamburg. He worked in Germany, he worked in America, he worked in France, he worked in Vienna. And you can see many different phases to his career. I suppose he is best known for the movies that he made in France near the end of his life, which Ronde, it came out in 1950, La Plaisir in 1952, The Earrings of Madame D in 1953, and Lola Montez in 1955. Movies that he made in America include The Reckless Moment, Caught, Letter from an Unknown Woman, and The Exile. He had previously, in 1933, adapted a work by Schnitzler, which was called Liebelei. You know who else is a fan of Schnitzler? Well, Tom Stoppard is a fan of Schnitzler. He has adapted two of Schnitzler's works. Stanley Kubrick, of course, was a fan, and Kubrick was a fan of both Schnitzler and his Traumnovelle, or dream novel, was adapted by Kubrick and Frederick Raphael into his last film, Eyes Wide Shut. And Ophuls was one of Kubrick's idols in terms of filmmaking, particularly fluidity of camera movement, tracking shots, and the like. I have a hypothesis about this film. I haven't seen anyone else make it, so I'm going to advance it. Of course, the play, the German name Reigen, and then, La Ronde, which has a similar meaning in France. One can point to the most famous literary example of this, which is a child's nursery rhyme. Ring a ring a roses, or ring a rosy, or ring around the rosy, which you may remember. And it is a round. I'll read from Wikipedia. Many incarnations of the game have a group of children form a ring, dance in a circle around a person, and stoop and curtsy with the final line. The slowest child to do so is faced with a penalty and becomes the rosy, literally rose tree, from the French rosier, and takes their place in the center of the ring. Now, the version that I grew up knowing, and probably many of you did, was ring around a rose is a pocket full of posies, tissue, as in sneeze, we all fall down. Now, it is postulated that this is a reference to the Black Plague. And given that La Ronde is about a circle of relationships, a man and a woman, and then either the man or the woman having a sexual relationship with someone else, and again and again and again, until a circle is completed, it strikes me that one of the themes of this movie could be syphilis. Because until the invention of antibiotics, syphilis was a terrifying disease, which ended up in its tertiary form with blindness, excruciating pain, and death, as well as hideous disfiguration. Although I should note that there are some that believe that the treatment was worse than disease, because until the invention of antibiotics, syphilis was treated with mercury, which is, of course, a deadly poison. This movie, just from its very first scene, one sees just how masterful it is. The whole movie was shot on sets, and it is a perfect example of what cineasts called mise en scène. Everything is in its place. Everything in this movie is placed and acted and shot for maximum of value. And of course, I could mention the script as well, which is brilliant. Ophuls and the co-writer of the screenplay, Jacques Nathanson, they made a significant change to the film, in which they added what you might call, what is described in the film as a compere, or what we would say as an MC of master ceremonies, played by the great Anton Walbrook, who is one of the marvels of cinema. On Theatre Thursday, some time ago, I discussed one of the masterpieces he was in, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. And I will be discussing in a few weeks another film by the Archers that he starred in called The Red Shoes. Walbrook was in so many great films, including the original version of Gaslight. He was in Powell and Pressburger's 49th Parallel. He was in a little-known film, which I commend to you, called The Queen of Spades, based on the Pushkin story, directed by Thorold Dickinson. He was in Ophuls' Le Plaisir, and in Lola Montez. You could identify Walbrook's performance by, the intensity and the intelligence, the kind of furious intelligence that he displays. Of course, he was also the handsomest man in the world. And in this film, he is the compere, he's the ringmaster that Ophuls has actually had constructed a real, merry-go-round. And it begins with this. And he has some words for us. And you see that he is, that the addition of this character is somewhat distancing Ophuls' film from Schnitzler's play. That you could see him as a meta device. He says, "And me, what part do I play in this story of La Ronde? The author, an accomplice, a passerby? I am you. That is, any one of you. I'm the personification of your desire to know everything. People never know more than one side of reality. Why? Because they only see one side of things. And this is one of the truest things ever said. People appear differently to other people. People play roles for other people. Our knowledge of other people can, we get it strained through our own consciousness. So other people are likely to have very different views than we would have. And of course, we look at people in terms of selfishness. What do they have that we want? What do they have that they are denying to us? But anyway, the compere raconteur, he says, people never know, as I say. I see in the round that allows me to be everywhere at once, everywhere. But just where are we? On a stage, a film set? One doesn't know anymore. On the street, we're in Vienna. It's 1900. Let's change our costume. 1900. We're in the past. I adore the past. It's so much more peaceful than the present and so much more certain than the future. The sun is out. It's spring. You can tell from the scent in the air that love is just around the corner, can't you? What's still missing for love to start its rounds? A waltz. And here it is. And the music is written by Oscar Strauss, not of the Strauss family, but famous in his own right. And here it is. The waltz turns, the carousel turns, and the merry-go-round of love can begin turning too. And he sings in this, what Germans call a Sprechgesang manner. They turn and turn, my characters turn, as night turns to day and joy to pain. Rain once fallen rises to heaven, turns into clouds and rains again. Working girl or woman of breeding, aristocrat or proud dragoon, love comes calling, sudden and fleeting, and they all dance to love's same tune. The cast in this movie is extraordinary. I'd have to say, particularly the women. And it's very clear why women were eager to appear in films by Max Ophuls, is because he made them look beautiful and desirable. The first woman we see is the great Simone Signoret. And she has a very unusual name, Leocadie. But Ophuls liked this. She's a prostitute. And we have Simone in this film, and she makes a very, very strong effect. Americans, her career in America wasn't all that successful, but she was in The Devil and Daniel Webster, Cat People, and Mysterious and Wonderful, The Curse of the Cat People, which is supposed to be a sequel, but it's not really. She has a very languid quality, which is quite fetching, I must say. We also have Danielle Derrieux, who was, I know people mock me for superlatives, but this is one of the most beautiful women in cinema history. And absolutely just commanding looks. We have the deliciously named Odette Joyeux in the role of the shop girl, or grisette, as they call them in France. The thing about the grisette is that these women typically come from low origins and occupy themselves with low-paying jobs. But because of their beauty and their, well, sexiness, they often trade up and up and up. The final woman that we have is Isa Miranda. She was an Italian actress, and she plays the actress in the film, and very commanding she is as well. The actors are Serge Reggiani, Daniel Guélin, who was a huge, he was a big star in France, Fernand Gravy, and we have Jean-Louis Barrault, big stars in this film, and finally Gérard Philippe, who is a, I don't know, French James Dean, because he died at the age of 36. He's become a huge cult figure. So Anton Walbrook, he appears in all the scenes dressed in different costumes. He has insinuated himself into the lives of all these people. And, well, since he's in effect the author of this entertainment, he knows what's going to happen before it happens. We begin with a soldier played by Serge Reggiani, France. And he is in a hurry to get back to his barracks. And he meets the prostitute played by Simone Signoret. She's a very patriotic woman, this Prozzi. She lets it be known that if you are in the army, she will give you her services for free. But France, as I say, is in a hurry to get back to his barracks because he doesn't want the punishment for being late. And eventually, well, she drags him down a steep set of stairs underneath a bridge where they have what's known as a knee trembler. Afterwards, she is not very happy with him. Yes. So you at least got a farewell cigarette, she says. France says, I'm all out, gotta run, good night. Leocadie, the prostitute, says, good night. That beats all. Some time I've had if everyone was a bum like you. Beat it, cheapsteak. Look at that bastard running off, the filthy swine, not even a cigarette. That's men. for you. Everyone is on the make in this film. I suppose this reflects Schnitzler's view of male-female relations. Schnitzler was a relentless seducer, which he chronicled in his diary, which is very clinical in names and times, numbers, that sort of thing. We next see the soldier who is attempting to seduce someone else, and Marie, who is a chambermaid, played by the aforementioned Simone. And she is told that she is going to be sacked for staying out too late. Our narrator tells her this, but tells her that she will get a job just like any other job as good as this one, and that something good will happen to you shortly. So we see her in the very large apartments of obviously a rich family, and we see the young master Alfred, who is quite taken with her, as any man would be, and he keeps coming up with excuses to bring her back into the room. He plays a very different role in this scene than he does in the previous scene. Again, going back to the theme that people play roles based on circumstances, or people appear different depending on who is looking at them, who is studying them. He is rather gauche and ungainly with Marie, the chambermaid. Finally, he has his way with her. She seems pleased enough by this. He had a French lesson at 6 o'clock, and he has Marie shut up the apartment so that it appears that no one is there. But then immediately after finishing up with Marie, he has to leave for a walk, he says. And he is rushing to meet his would-be mistress, Emma, played by Danielle Derieux. And he is such an ardent lover. And, we get the usual business. She's a married woman. No, I mustn't. Oh, I love you so much. You must surrender to my ardor. But no, I mustn't. I must flee. And, yes, this is consummated as well. And there seems to be a promise from her to him that they are going to keep this up, that he has passed the test in some way. We next see Emma, the wife, that same night in adjoining beds with her husband, Charles, who is much older than her, probably 20 years older, one would suspect. And it would seem that he is not all that keen on his wife sexually at the time. He explains about, ebbs and flows, which seems rather strange, at least to me, when you have a look at Danielle Derieux, why there would be much in the way of ebbs and flows. But the point seems to be that there is a difference between love and marriage, that marriage isn't about love, that marriage is about convenience. And we have this interesting discussion after after we find that the wife has been reading Stendhal's On Love, a rather wicked work. And yes, what are you doing reading Stendhal? Is it good? Very instructive. And so she starts asking questions. Essentially, was he a virgin when they married? And did you ever have an affair with a married woman? And he confesses that he did. And he is quite pompous in his hypocrisy. That is what he says. Alternation is the basic principle of life. Marital love is, how shall I put it, marriage is a disconcerting mystery. You well-bred young ladies come to us ignorant and pure. You haven't lived. You couldn't know, but we knew. And what a price we paid. Who wouldn't be disgusted with love after the woman we've condemned to start out with? But we have no choice. And Emma says, tell me about it. Tell me about those creatures. I find it fascinating. He says, I trust you're joking. She says, I've always asked you about your youth with those creatures. He says, no, you don't understand. It'd be a sort of defilement. Oh, it was so long ago, she says. And essentially, yes, he says, Emma, you must swear to me that you'll never befriend a woman you think is less than irreproachable. I know you wouldn't seek out such friendship, but these women of dubious reputation often seek out the company of respectable women out of a sort of nostalgia of virtue. What I just said is very profound. It's a nostalgia of virtue. Their own unworthiness pains them. She says, you think so? He replies, I'm absolutely positive. Think of their dreadful lives, trickery, lies, and constant danger. They pay dearly for the tiny bit of happiness, not even happiness. Pleasure? How can you call that pleasure? I'm just guessing. Otherwise, they wouldn't. It's intoxication. Intoxication, she says? Yes, intoxication. And in the next scene, we see Charles, who has been revealed to be a quite rich businessman. And he has picked up a grisette. And played by Odette Joyeux, and very attractive. She is too. She says that she's 19 years old. She asks how old he is, and he says almost 30, which is hilarious because he clearly looks as if he's 50 or older. And he has taken her to a salon privé of quite an expensive restaurant where he plies her with her favorite food, shrimp and champagne. And he has little of the champagne. She drinks almost a whole bottle and gets drunk as a result, which has a usefulness. She can blame her willingness to be seduced on a divan in the restaurant on the champagne. You know, it wasn't me. There must be something in the champagne, she says. My head is spinning. Well, it's a very convenient excuse. And he seems to be well pleased with this grisette, who is clearly moving up in the world. And she wants something a little more permanent, you know. And he says to her, she says, will I see you soon? And he says, I don't live in Vienna. I just visit from time to time. She says, I bet you're married. When a man says he doesn't live in Vienna, he's usually married. And Charles said, you wouldn't feel guilty about seducing a married man? And she says, not at all. I imagine his wife would be off doing the same, which of course is true. But Charles is a bit of a blockhead. So the young Anna is what they call hypergamous, and she is looking to trade up already, which she does. She meets Robert, the poet, the great poet and playwright, played by Jean-Louis Barrault. And she is in his fabulous atelier, and not, as she is arranged to do, meeting with Charles in the salon privé of the restaurant. And there's a sad scene where we see Charles, and he's alone, and there's the champagne, and it hasn't been touched. And of course, our waiter, who is played by Anton Walbrook, he comes in, and what's the time? Just after 11, I suppose, the waiter says, and looks at his watch. Charles says 10 to 12. And Walbrook says, yes, that's the same time I have. In other words, he was just trying to spare his feelings that perhaps Anna was going to show up after all, but she doesn't. And we get a reverse of that scene when Anna she sets her cap at this poet playwright, you know, who's the talk of all Vienna with his witty plays. And they have made an arrangement to meet, and he doesn't show up. because he's infatuated with the lead actress in his new play, which is debuting that night. And there's a sad scene where Anna knocks on the window and a commissioner opens the door. And what time is it? Just after 11, he says. And she sees a watch, and 10 to 12. And the commissioner says, yes, that's the time I have too. I should notice that there are many clocks and watches seen in this film. Kind of unifying symbolism, noting the passing of time. We are all getting older, and this advance is inexorable. And of course, the suggestion is that we should make hay while the sun shines. There is also, you will see many times in this book, in this movie, bird cages, suggesting, of course, I'm only a bird in a gilded cage, that these women in Vienna, regardless of their class, are, they live based on what men will allow them to do or what men will give them. And we are introduced then to the actress, the grande dame, played by Isa Miranda, Charlotte. And she has a visitor. The grandest fellow that we have met so far, he is the Count, played by Gérard Philippe. And oh, my word, what an outfit they wore in those days. And she meets him in her bedroom, which, of course, was not done in those days. But, of course, she's an actress. And actresses at the time were thought to be a little better than prostitutes. But he is quite taken by her boldness, and her beauty and imperiousness intoxicate him. And we have a very amusing scene in this film where, as if to show, to demonstrate that, yes, it's one thing to talk about love. It's another thing to talk about sexual intercourse. But the act itself, do we really want to see this? Do we really want to see and hear all of this sweating and grunting? No. It's far easier to accept sex as an unstoppable force when one isn't confronted with the sometimes unfortunate mechanics of it. There's a wonderful scene where we see Anton Walbrook. He says censorship, and then he holds up several feet of film and then takes a big snip here and a big snip here and carries it away. Well, we're not going to put that in my film, which is... that is a really a coup de théâtre, You see, there's another one in this film where one of our men, the first time around, the fellow with the married woman, he's just not up to the job, and so Anton Walbrook has been manually operating the carousel, and the carousel breaks. It comes to a stop, and Walbrook disappears, and he fiddles with some stuff, and then the carousel starts turning again. And our ardent young man, he does seem to be up to it after that. In the final scene, our Count, for some reason, he decides not to accept his assignment with the actress, and gets filthy drunk with one of his comrades in the army, and ends up in the garret of the same prostitute that we saw at the beginning. And we see him, apparently he's managed to do the job, despite, as she says, having had a skinful, and we see him staggering out at a sunrise, and his faithful dog has been waiting in an adjoining room. So the circle is complete. As I said at the beginning, this film is absolutely masterful. The direction, the acting, the photography, the art direction, which is just gasp-inducing. the central conceit of the movie, that life is like a carousel, and we're going to have an actual carousel here, and we're going to have an actual proscenium from the beginning. It's just the beautiful execution of the imagination makes this a tremendous movie. So, unfortunately, this movie is there's no Blu-ray by Criterion. The other two films of his late period, actually the other three, Le Plaisir, the Earrings of Madame de, and Lola Montez, have been brought out by Criterion on Blu-ray, but not La Ronde for some reason. There is an English Blu-ray, or there's a Blu-ray that you can get. It's DVD Beaver, which is authoritative, is not very keen on it, but I suppose it's an improvement over the DVD. So those are my thoughts on La Ronde. And let's have a final look at the chat. Salon Privé were cool. Don't see them anymore, says Chogokin 666. Glib Bentley says, Vincent Gallo is the only director I know of who's on record as a big Trump supporter. Would you want that guy to be one of your supporters? Texas Feral Hog says, wasn't Freud's hatred blossoming in 1900 Vienna? I suppose it was. Freud was very impressed by Schnitzler's work. But Tom Wolfe has written about this. I think it's a poisonous view, and certainly false. The idea that the human body is like a boiler, and that steam must be reduced from time to time, or on a regular basis, so that the boiler doesn't explode. This is Schnitzler's view of male-female sexuality. As it turns out, that there are plenty of men and women who can take it or leave it, and there are plenty of men and women who have little interest in it. But this sex-centered view of humanity, of course, Freud popularized this to the world, and a great many people believe in it today, even though, as we know from the surveys, that young people don't seem to be very interested in sexual intercourse these days. And I mean sexual intercourse. I don't mean, looking at a screen and doing horrible things. I don't know. There's an intimacy there. And the younger people they're not interested in human intimacy. Chokin 666, pocket full of posies. The ring being the circle around the red spot from a bite. Yes, we see lots of cherubs in this film, as well as many. We see the great god Pan many times as well. There's tremendous artistic unity here. Okay. So, did you see the Milius documentary, Kevin? I haven't seen it yet. His daughter made it, didn't she? It's very interesting that Spielberg and Lucas and the others just accepted how he was and seemed like friends, so unlike today. Well, yeah. Milius was a Goldwater supporter, And Lawrence Gordon, who was a film producer who became head of 20th Century Fox, once said to Milius that you're not a Jew, because Milius is a Jew. He says, you're not a Jew, you're a goddamn Nazi. I don't know. It might have something to do with Milius's super patriotism. No, I haven't seen the Milius documentary, but I will. I certainly will. Oscar Tosa says, John Milius back to normal after his stroke. I watched stalking him and seemed to be doing very well. I don't know that he made very much money from screenwriting and directing. I'd heard some years ago that he was having money problems, and some of his friends were raising money from him. Yo Mama says, I learned the song with ashes instead of tissues. Well, how that fits into the hypothesis is, of course, the body's of the plague victims were burned. So, what is coming up culture-wise on the KMG show? Next week, I am talking about a Polish film from 1957, Andrzej Wajda's Canal, which is about the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. And, I like movies that are intense. This is one of the most intense movies. And August 5th, a movie about conspiracies, which we know don't exist. It's directed by David Robert Mitchell from 2018. It's called Under the Silver Lake. As previously mentioned, from 1948 on August 12th, I'll be discussing the most beautiful Technicolor film ever, perhaps, The Red Shoes by the Archers. And staying in Europe for August 19th, I will be discussing Vittorio De Sica's 1952 classic, Umberto D., which is the story of a man and his dog. On the book club, tomorrow I'm talking about Boris Johnson's book, which I seem to have advanced up the order for some reason. Okay, I apologize for that. I was supposed to be talking about Suite Française, but I guess I'll have to knock that back a week. So tomorrow, yes, Boris Johnson, The Gambler by Tom Bauer. And on Music Monday, I'm going to be talking about Richard Strauss, An Honorable Man. Thank you all for tuning in. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. I'll be back in the air tomorrow, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to make a donation to this live stream, which honestly I could really, really use right now, my PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.